Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're at. Great to see you. I know a lot of the people that are here in attendance and certainly lots of speakers. It's an honor to be with all of you. So I'm going to give you the broad vision of what's happening at AASHTO, particularly to the Moonshot project. Some of you are very connected to that. Some of you are not. This started 2 years ago from an NCHRP project called Collective and Individual Actions to Envision and Realize the Next Era of America's Transportation Infrastructure. Okay, a lot of words there, but there's two important pieces: collective and individual actions. This was put forward by state DOTs. So this is the state's professional transportation people coming together saying, here's what we should be thinking about. So let's go to the next slide. So through a lot of conversations with, in fact, I interviewed every single state DOT director, secretary, commissioner, and additional external partners as well. Ultimately, in the end, the AASHTO Board of Directors approved unanimously this vision that says it's community-centered transportation, which is a system focused on connecting communities, moving people and goods, meeting customers' needs at all scales from local to global, delivered in a partnership between state DOTs and other public, private, and civic sector partners. Now, the local to global and the scale is really important because understanding customer needs at a very, very local level, meaning you're engaging with the local homeowners group, right? All the way to the needs of national supply chain where, you know, maybe the local homeowners group is not going to have the same voice as the international shipper. So this was carefully crafted to get unanimous support. And if any of you that have done national work know, unanimous support is really, really hard to get. Well, let's go to the next slide. So around this vision, the AASHTO board put some aspirational goals. So you can see safe and secure. Notice it doesn't say just safety. This is safe and secure. A big piece came out about human trafficking. Let's make sure that the system is safe for everybody. A system that's accessible, affordable, it's seamless, reliable, it's healthy and thriving, clean, sustainable, agile, and resilient. Okay, those are the big aspirational goals. Now let's go to the next slide. So from that, we came up with some moonshots, and I'll give Julie Lorenz a lot of credit. This was her term. She said, you know, in 1962, when President Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon, there wasn't anybody anywhere that said, yeah, we know how to do that. And essentially, this is the same thing. But by 1969, we landed on the moon. So what it did was focus all of our efforts towards one particular area. So in this area, we said, okay, well, what if we make aggressive progress towards Vision Zero? That doesn't mean throwing out Vision Zero. It says, well, okay, well, what if we could by 2030 or 2034 cut the number in half, right? Some other number. What if we could increase the access to opportunities for ALICE households? ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. This is the working poor. That's 30% of our fellow Americans fall into that category. The commissioner from Maine, as I interviewed him, he said, you know, transportation can't solve poverty. And I said, yeah, that's right. He said, but we can make sure that transportation is never the reason someone is in poverty. And that's what that moonshot is focused on. Now, the one that's important to you all, deploy intelligent infrastructure along our major highway corridors. That's connected with the next one. Next slide, Ted. And that is create a nationwide digital technology infrastructure, right? That was kind of dubbed Light Up the Interstates. Now, this group will understand what Light Up the Interstates means, but I can tell you I was talking to another group that says, well, why would we want lights every quarter mile on a freeway? No, that's not what we were talking about. Anyways, and then the other ones are, what if we transform how we power the transportation system? What if we rethink how we connect communities and regions? And what if we put communities at the center of our planning process? So that was one component, and we'll come back to that. Now let's go to the other component. Next slide is to develop a spectrum of actions that states can take. So here's the different levers that they've come up with. Okay, land use coordination, plans and programs, assets and right-of-ways, technology, data, human resources, a bunch of different actions of which there's a whole bunch of information behind all of that. But let's go to the next slide. So here's how it's used. So let's say an individual state, and they're all kind of bunched together here. There's usually 3 slides. So a state says, you know what, I can only have a modest change because of my rules and regulations over land use. But I can really do some transformative stuff in human resources. So now if you start with 50 different of these, 50 different versions, and you start packing them on top of each other, you can start to see that there's probably a state doing something that's transformative in every one of those. And frankly, that's how states move forward. When somebody steps out, somebody else looks and says, hey, if they can do that over here, we can do it as well. And you move forward together. Let's go to the next slide. So let's get to the initial deployments. We had 13 applications from 11 states to lead some deployments. You can see the I-80 piece clearly attaches all the way through. You heard about that from Tracy. You heard about I-35 from Texas. Now, what was interesting is as we looked at all of these, they fit into all of those different moonshots. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk specifically about technology. So you heard Tracy talk about I-80. You heard Erica talk about I-35 and I-10. Some of you may have just recently read the news of Utah getting a large USDOT grant for broadband interstates. I mean, their vision is broadband across all interstates in Utah. That piece will help along with their neighboring states as well. The other state that we haven't talked about is Georgia. Georgia's taking some very interesting progress towards deploying that broadband and setting up a P3 providing access. So there's some really interesting things happening, but these are clearly the 4 lead states, and there's a bunch of them that are connected to it as well. But if we think about it in a broader context, what's the moonshot look like, right? Well, the moonshot could be, okay, in 10 years, we want to have 100% situational awareness or 100% interoperability or 50% of the truck miles are automated, or we've got reliable travel times. So you take the pieces that are starting to be put in place now and you think broader, say, well, what does that really mean? When we get these pieces put in place, what does that lead us to? So we're starting to see, and these states are helping us develop, what does that moonshot really look like? Let's go to the next slide. Kind of wrapping up here, there's 2 deployments going on energy, about how to use the right-of-ways for clean energy. Let's go to the next slide. There's 3 states that are looking at access to opportunities. Let's go to the next slide. And what did we learn? We learned focus on the customer. Technology is an enabler for every one of these moonshots. So while we're talking specifically about the technology aspects of the interstates, the technology piece will help these other ones roll forward. We learned that partnerships are critical, and more than just our traditional partners, but more so non-traditional partners. We also learned there's big solutions and small solutions. We can't just shoot for the big ones. We got to do the small ones as well. And again, it's individual and collective actions are what's going to get us there. In the end, there is internal change that's needed in workforce and governance and data and process. And you might recognize a couple of those terms that showed up on Tracy's subgroup list, right? Data and governance. All of that is going to roll into that as well. Let's go to the next slide. All right, what's next? We're continuing to build this out. We're working with those individual states on those deployments. And then we're doing, just like everybody else is, coordinating with everybody and anybody and presenting at lots and lots of different opportunities. Let's go to the next slide. And that's it for me.